welcome to the Pursuit of Happiness, the weekly Act TV show where we discuss the way policy shapes our personal lives for better and frequently for worse. I am very, very, very excited to be here with two of my dearest friends and colleagues, Rebecca and Juliana. Hi, ladies. How are you this afternoon?
Hi, Jocelyn.
I am so glad we're doing this. So we've been working together for years now. And, my happiness to have you here is tempered by the less happy news of the past 7 days. It has been a bizarre week where I asked literally everyone this on the streets in front of the Supreme Court. Were you all shocked when you read about the Politico leak?
Go ahead, Rebecca.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people in the sense that we knew this was coming. The writing has been on the wall for years. We've talked about it before. So I think while maybe some of us saw this and expected it, it's still shocking because it affects us in ways that are, quite serious on a human level. I live in Texas, so yeah, it was still shocking, even though we expected it.
Yeah, I agree with Rebecca. It was still shocking, even though it was expected, especially people who've been following the issue like we at ACT-TV. I think, though, that the shock was actually very good. I talked about this a little bit on my own program, where they were obviously preparing for the case and the decision that they were going to be able to present formally in, I believe it's June or July, whenever that was coming up. And, if that had been the way they delivered this news, that the rollback of Roe v. Wade was imminent, the news would have started talking about it. People would have started getting ready for it. People would have started having conversations. Twitter would have been aware of it, and it would have blunted the impact of just like leak. It's today. It's over. That's it. And I do think that is helpful in terms of waking people up, not only to the loss of bodily autonomy for, I would say, at least half the population, maybe more. It also was so shocking to me because I was like, the Supreme Court is done. It's not, it's not part of the democratic government structure anymore. So it was just like the shock of Roe v. Wade itself, and then the shock of watching our quote unquote democratic institutions crumble before our eyes with proof. That was, it just was salt in the wound.
Well, and I love that you say that, Juliana, because I think that's, when we were discussing this in pre-show, Rebecca was like, yeah, we have to talk about the Democrats' complicity in this. And that is a central part of this story that this isn't a controversial issue. Most Americans believe that people should have safe access to abortion. Most Americans are actually in agreement on this. I have mixed feelings about the New York Times has been doing these podcasts on the abortion fight, and they're like, the culture wars. Okay, but that's deceptive. Most Americans feel pretty similarly. No one wants to have an abortion, but it is a consequence of being a human being and the consequence that falls with people with uteruses, right? Like it's Rebecca said this in pre-show as well. Like this is a part of life. No one is excited about abortion, but most people, 70% of America, understand this is just a part of healthcare that we need access to. And I agree with you, Juliana. I think maybe the shock is a good thing. Maybe the shock is something we needed to be like, no, these people are serious, because I don't care what gender you are. You should be very, very concerned about a major arm of government trying to tell you what healthcare you can and can't access.
Absolutely. The thing that really gets me is to go outside of this debate about when life begins and to really focus on the thing like the ectopic pregnancy thing, where like it implants in your, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Yeah, in your fallopian tubes, yeah. And then basically it explodes because it keeps growing, and then you die as a woman. So you can't have that removed.
They're never viable.
They're never viable. They'll never make it in. Yeah.
Pregnancies are never viable. This whole conversation about replanting is an ectopic pregnancy, a pseudoscience. It doesn't exist. That is not possible. Yeah, and I heard you talk about that on your show, Juliana. It's very scary because people can and will die if you don't abort the pregnancy of an ectopic pregnancy. So a lot of these conversations are just not based in science. They're not based in historical fact, which is that if you look at the history of abortion, it's been around forever. It's ancient. It's not going away. It will never go away, even if they make laws to ban it.
Yeah, it's based in a sea change in morality that is totally dehumanizing and fascistic. It's in service to corporate America, because if you subjugate the people who have children by forcing them to have children they can't afford, then what are they going to do? They've got to go get a second job at the Walmart that's not going to pay them or give them any health care. This really is in service to a greater economic agenda. And it's hard not to talk about that. I don't hear a lot of people
I love that I was hoping that's where this conversation was going to go, because it's, I'm not trying to sound like, oh, it all fits together, man, but it kind of does, right? We are in an era of history where people with a lot of resources want to make everybody from very working class and marginalized to upper middle class people's lives as difficult as possible. So we won't see, hey, we all actually have a lot in common, and these people are profiting in billions and trillions of dollars off our healthcare, off our need for housing, off our need to educate our children. Because if they make us as busy and distracted as possible, it is more difficult for us to organize. They've done studies on this, on peaceful revolutions, where the more kids people have, the more demands people have, the more commitments people have, the less likely people are to mobilize, which makes perfect sense.
Oh, Jocelyn, we showed the video of you covering the protests in DC, and one of the interviews, you were like, "There's a lot of young people and then older people." I'm like, "Yeah, because we're home. We're at our offices, strapped to our desk. We got to pick up our kids at 3. So thank you, older people and younger people who could, get into the street and have that show of solidarity in the middle of the week, not just when we could go. Those middle-aged folks can go on the weekend."
Well, and it's something that I think we talk about a lot on our programs. The ability to mobilize is frequently a privilege, and it shouldn't be. But they want to keep it that way, right? It's like, if it's difficult for people to speak up for their rights, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, does it really do anything? I'm just going to focus on myself.
Ever since Occupy Wall Street, and Rebecca, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this too. Ever since Occupy Wall Street showed the powers that be that the people who are organizing in the street are well educated now. It's not just sort of people on the margins of society who have to demand their rights. There's so many people that are jobless, that are unable to succeed in what was promised to them if they went to college, or what was promised to them if they did what was asked of them by society, and now they're not getting those promises. That we have a bigger community of educated people who are willing to take to the streets, and I do think that that's kind of frightened the powers that be, starting at Occupy. It wasn't just what do you think about that, Rebecca? It always struck me that people have, sorry to ask a question on your show, Jocelyn.
No, please do.
That's what Rebecca knows about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think they painted occupiers as young, unintelligent, jobless people, and that wasn't the case, and so you had Fox News going down there, sort of like asking questions to people, and then painting this idea like they don't know what they're talking about, they don't know what they're asking, which was not the case. There were people from all economic backgrounds, there was professionals, there were students, there were scholars and academics. It was basically they do that to silence a movement, and it's not true. And so that's why obviously I think independent media is very important. And yeah, I mean, it's expected, you know, that news outlets do this.
Yes. Well, I
Well,
just meant like that, you know, nowadays the people who are organizing for solidarity at Starbucks, they're working as baristas and they have like PhDs in English. This is not like your average, hey, we're being screwed person. You know what I mean? This is like a very educated populace being underemployed and not utilized. And I think that that is actually quite scary to the structure. You know, we've told everyone you have to get an education, then they did, and now they're still not able to move forward. Well, a certain segment of the population. So I didn't mean to derail your conversation, Jocelyn. Obviously,
no, it's really important because it ties right into reproductive rights, right? Especially communities of color were shamed in the 90s by conservatives like, oh, like you need to have two-parent homes and get educations. It's your fault that slavery existed hundreds of years ago, leading to generational poverty and trauma. It's like, and so a lot of really intelligent, brilliant, hardworking people internalized that. Were like, okay, I'm going to do anything in my power to send my kids to college, to if I am the person to get a college degree. And now we have a situation where Black women are the most educated, least compensated group in America. And it's disgusting because you can't, these typical poverty shaming tactics aren't working when more Americans have college degrees than ever. And it just, oh no, you were
Yeah,
about to.
no, and like student debt, I think Black women have the highest percentage also of student loan debt, which is another promise that Joe Biden and the Democrats are not coming through on. So I think like just tying it back to abortion rights is that, you know, this is a Democratic led you know, time with that we're in. The Democrats have the majority in the House, in the Senate, in the White House. And there's a couple of issues like we were talking about economically, not delivering on student loan debt, and then having the right to abortion be stripped away, I think is very dangerous for the Democrats as the midterms are approaching. And then also in the presidential election, like why expect anybody to vote for a Democrat or to give money to a Democrat when our rights are being stripped away and people are suffering economically? Why would they expect to vote? Why would they expect any money or frankly any respect at this point?
Well, and I love that you say that, Rebecca, because like, look, I think most people want to say, oh, just, you know what, it's complicated. Vote for them. They mean that they say the right things. We're watching a right that, and again, for people that don't know the history, the right to safe abortion wasn't terribly controversial not that long ago. It was an issue that was weaponized in the 80s to help Republicans in the moral majority gain power. But in 1973, when Roe was passed, it wasn't really people are like, okay, yeah, sure, women should have safe right to abort. It wasn't the hot button issue it is now. And Democrats, instead of standing their ground and saying, hey, everybody is losing their minds. What happens between a person and their healthcare provider is their private medical decision, their right to privacy. Instead, Democrats are ceding ground to this increasingly reactionary right-wing minority that doesn't represent how most Americans feel. Rebecca, does now feel like a good time to play this video?
Oh yeah, of course. Do you want to give an intro, a brief intro, or
do you want to do it? It was Rebecca's suggestion, and I love it.
Well, I'll just say that, you know, there's this whole notion of the Democratic Party being a big tent, right? Which has been for years, the Democratic Party, they say they welcome people from all ideologies. And it's in stark contrast, I think, to the Republican Party, who's, you know, pretty hard line on certain issues. And so this is just an example in the more recent years of prominent Democrats talking about welcoming anti-choice people into the party.
What should unify the Democratic Party? What should make somebody a Democrat and not a Democrat? And I ask it in this way. There's been a lot of back and forth, especially among abortion rights activists, about a decision of the Democratic Party to support a candidate for mayor in Omaha, a Democrat, who happens to be pro-life. And there are some that, and at some point, the Democratic National Committee chairman actually had to put out the following statement after 3 days of back and forth. He said, I fundamentally disagree with Heath Mellow's personal beliefs, the candidate for Omaha mayor, about women's reproductive health. It is a promising step that the candidate now shares the Democratic Party's position on women's fundamental rights. Each candidate who runs as a Democrat should do the same, because every woman should be able to make her own health choices, period. Can you be a Democrat?
Why don't you interview Tom Perez?
Let me ask you this,
Nate.
but can you be a Democrat and the support of the Democratic Party if you're pro-life?
Of course. Of course. I have served for many years in Congress with members who have not shared my very positive, my family would say, aggressive position on promoting a woman's right to choose.
Yesterday, Nancy Pelosi said, forget
Yeah,
all the nonsense you're hearing. Yes, we want pro-life Catholics in our party, and if they run, we can support them. You certainly showed that in Pennsylvania, that a pro-life Catholic.
I got killed. I got criticized.
You got killed, but he's still the senator in Pennsylvania.
And
that's
a great
still
senator.
A vote
you bet.
your way.
Look, we're a big tent party, as Nancy Pelosi said, but we are, let's make no mistake about it, we're a pro-choice party. We're a strongly pro-choice party. We think that's where the American people are, and in fact, if anything, are moving even more in that direction.
But you
We're
welcome
a big tent party.
You welcome pro-life Catholics.
That's his answer,
even if they're
Joe.
running.
Big tent
Gave you
party.
my answer.
That's a yes.
Over the weekend,
Hi, Megan.
Hi, how are you? Bernie Sanders said, this is a quote. He said, I think being pro-choice is an absolutely essential part of being a Democrat. And you got some attention over the weekend because you don't seem to think that. You seem to think that there's room for pro-life people in your party. I just want to confirm, do you think there's room for pro-life Democrats to vote for you?
Well, first I say this, I am strongly pro-choice. I have always been pro-choice, but I believe we're a big tent party, and there are pro-life Democrats, and they are part of our party, and I think we need to build a big tent. I think we need to bring people in instead of shutting them out, and that also includes independents right here in New Hampshire, as well as moderate Republicans.
So what did they think was going to happen?
I'm struck by something. It's like, so we have a situation where people like us, who I don't think of as terribly radical, right? Nothing anyone on this show believe, and that's a label they've shoved at us, and I sort of resent it, because it's like we just want the climates to survive. We want basic economic and racial justice. These should not be radicalized notions, and the Democratic establishment is accepting that.
Not only are they accepting it, welcoming them in, but they're actually have endorsed candidates who are anti-choice, including one prominent one in Texas who is Cuellar, who voted with Trump the majority of the time when Trump was in office. It's just,
how does this guy claim to be a Democrat, just out of curiosity? Because if there's no, I think I know the race you're talking about, and there is another candidate that Pelosi could have endorsed, right?
Right.
Like another more economically, progressive candidate.
A young woman, Jessica Cisneros, was running against, or is running against, I believe they're in a runoff right now against Henry Cuellar, who was endorsed by Jim Clyburn and like all of these prominent Dems, maybe Nancy Pelosi, although I'm not sure. I don't know. I think that, I've been watching some of the interviews and just like doing research about this big tent, and I think they have this idea that Southern quote unquote Democrats will vote with the party, line, but they're more conservative. So they want to appeal to Democrats in conservative states.
I mean, it's hard because you can't. One of the problems that we see with the march of fascism is that people are lining up behind Trump's ideology, behind Trumpism. And if you stray from that position, you're out. But the reality is people don't fall into these neat columns. Now, the right is, I kind of think a big tent position is good as long as it's like, we welcome you voters, big tent, but we're,
I think
we have to all get together on some level. But, what do you make of the fact that there needs to be room for, I mean, the country is so much bigger than just like what fascism is doing to like everyone fall in line with Trump. We don't have that on this side. And it could be a problem, but it also could be kind of useful on some level.
I think you brought up the F word, which I'm glad you did, which is, fascism. It is fascistic to not allow somebody the right to bodily autonomy, to not have control over your own body is fascist. And I think that there should be a line in the sand. And talking about Trump, in Austin this Saturday, there's going to be an abortion rally. Also in Trump on Saturday. Okay, well, Trump is going to be also in Austin on Saturday. So Trump is not going away. I think it's interesting.
Trump knows all about abortions. He's
probably paid for many of them.
Anyway, sorry about that.
Yeah,
a serious point here.
I think, look, can I tell you my theory on this? I think that, we're all big on economic justice, right? My actual belief here is that congressional Democrats and Senate Democrats don't actually identify with the people whose votes they're trying to get. The average net worth in Congress is something like millions of dollars. So for these people, abortion will never go away. All they have to do is take a trip to a different state or, move to a different country. Like, this is the people that are elected to represent us right now are leading drastically different lives than we are, right? For us. And we're all employed people. Even for us, like taking a trip to a different state to get accessible healthcare, that is an economic difference for us. For them, it's not. And so they don't, they might intellectually believe that everybody should have right to choice, but they emotionally don't really identify with the reality of what it would be for a couple $100s to be something that is a deal breaker for you.
Yeah, it's very expensive. For people in Texas, for example, going to neighboring states to get an abortion, it is cost prohibitive for many people. Also, people might not be able to take off work. They might have children already, and then they have to find healthcare. So, yeah, I mean,
it's
you're
already
right.
hard enough to find a regular healthcare provider. There's like a shortage of just to get a doctor, and then to not have that doctor be a patriarchal asshole. Excuse me, I'm speaking for a friend, not mine. I just talked some friend of mine through like, okay, so he wouldn't believe you, even though a woman. Anyway, long story. Don't want to break anyone's privacy, but it's hard to find just any kind of healthcare, much less having to travel out of state. I live in a blue state right now. It has a blue archipelago that's pretty strong, but the wooded areas are quite red and quite Trumpy. You would expect to find people logging and like with a girl tied up in some sort of trailer in the backyard. You go past these parts and you're like, Jesus, get me out of here. Anyway, sorry, Connecticut.
Well, and
it's true. Wait. The point I have is like people in blue states are like, gee, that's going to be terrible for Texas. And no one is waking up to the fact that if the Republicans gerrymander, voter disenfranchise, lie, intimidate, whatever their way into a red Congress, they could just vote to outlaw reproductive rights for women and trans people and other people across the whole country and have it be done. So it doesn't even matter if am I wrong here? If the Democrats are like, we're going to pass this law, can't they just do something else if they get in? Aren't we kind of screwed here?
I mean, it's 26, right? It's not just Texas. 26 states would ban abortion. That's insane, if I can use that word.
And then if the Republicans actually get in, the rest of the states would ban abortion. But I'm really sick of having the Democratic Party, back to your points that you made earlier, be the party of like, well, I guess we're just slightly better. At least 20 states will still have abortions. You can go on abortion vacation. Like that. I'm tired of not having a fucking party that is like, no, we draw the line here. And we do. Yeah. We have some people who say, no, we draw the line here.
Yeah.
Politics is a fucking dirty business. It's a dirty business. So it's like, we draw the line here, we draw the line over there. But I agree with you, Rebecca, that there's some things that because of their they're just complete opposition to humanism or, anti-fascism should not be allowed. I think the voters might be able to be pro-choice, but if you vote someone or pro-life, Democratic voters could say like, well, I'm, pro-life, but I also believe in these other things like the environment. I don't want to poison the kids once they're here. I don't want, once they should be able, but the party should maybe have to say like, we're against fascism and all its, all its incarnations.
If you don't, as a party, stand for something, then what do you stand for? Then it's just different personalities calling themselves Democrats, but they're not actually, they don't actually believe in democratic ideas, right? It's just, AOC actually said this, like, we're just inviting anybody in. You can call yourself a Democrat, but you're not if you have these fascist,
views.
Yeah.
Well, and I would like to, if I could just appeal to the pro-life voters for a moment. You don't have to believe abortion is a good thing. And that is somewhere that I think we have dropped the ball as Democrats. It's like Juliana's saying, we can say abortion is an uncomfortable situation. And then the way to prevent abortion is to make sure that women have accesses to literally every form of birth control, healthcare, education, proper wage for proper work that they could ever possibly need. So abortions are not, because an abortion is a last resort, right? It's either because a wanted pregnancy did not go correctly, which is something that needs to be talked about more, or a woman is pregnant who didn't want to be. Nobody is like, you know what? I think that would be great if there was more of that in my life. And if it's something you care about, we should be having actual comprehensive sexual education for young people. We should be providing condoms and birth control and the type of living wage where any woman who wants to be a mother or uterus having person who wants to be a parent can do that. Right now, having a child is so exorbitantly expensive that even dual income, upper middle class families are kind of like, can we really afford this? Homes are like $1 million in areas that aren't even metropolitan, or it's wild.
Right. I think like you hit on a good point, which is that they call themselves pro-life, but they're not actually pro-life, right? Like they don't take care of children and parents who are actualized human beings outside of the womb. So, Texas is the least insured state. Texas, for some reason, has refused to accept federal funding to expand Medicaid under the ACA, even though if Governor Abbott had accepted this at the beginning of his tenure, it would have brought in $100 billion to the state of Texas. So because they chose not to expand Medicaid, we've been the least insured state. It also has the highest percentage of uninsured women of childbearing age. Texas has a seriously high percentage of maternal mortality rate. The US does also. So it doesn't really care about life. I think, we need to call them anti-choice. We need to call it an anti-choice versus pro-life, because they've shown themselves not to be pro-life.
Yeah, they're pro-death. Really, their whole agenda in this case and in other cases is kind of a pro-death agenda. When back to the F word, Rebecca, back to the word of fascism, when we look back at history, the history of fascism in other countries, what we see is the march toward fascism. One of the stages is legal fascism, using the law for fascistic ends to limit freedom, for those ends. And this is that. And so just for me, watching the United States implode upon itself in a controlled demolition from the right it's so unnerving and shocking. And that was just like one more, that's another law. That's another fascistic law. Fascism takes root when we have a fascist leader, really, truly fascist, who then shoots people as they're protesting, arrests journalists, etc. Trump said he wanted to shoot people while they were the Black Lives Matter people. He said he will. Can I shoot him? And they're like, we don't think it's a good idea. And he said, can I shoot him in the leg? And I mean, this was Trump's. So he was a true fascist. So we did have him for a brief moment, hopefully not to return. But it does certainly seem like we are on the march to having more of this in every different area.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody who essentially, fueled an armed insurrection to be talking in my state on Saturday, it's pretty unnerving. And then to have somebody in the White House who, I'm sorry, could be doing a lot more with executive orders, including, having President Biden could have formed, like a review process. Remember when he was talking about all of this and it took him months, and he could have just done that by executive order to investigate the January 6th insurrection, but he didn't. So he's not taking actions that he could take. And so now you have Elon Musk buying Twitter, saying that he's going to allow Trump back on, and he's speaking at rallies. I mean, this guy basically led an armed insurrection, and he's just out. And now, with everything that's happening, with abortion and,
we've got way less. I mean, when people are shocked, it's like, where you been? Why shocked? I get that it was kind of like startling that this happened today. I wasn't expecting it, but it's like watching the Titanic go down.
Well, and I love that. So we're obviously all politically engaged people. It's why we're here. But I love that Rebecca was like, yeah, we need to talk about Democrats' complicity in this happening, because I do think that the current age of citizenship means we need to be focusing more on mutual aid. We do need to be focusing more on, yes, staying engaged in the process, advocating with our full bodies and hearts and minds for the policy we want. But at the end of the day, now is the time for us to decolonize whatever part of us believes that, like, yes, I, an individual, will fix the system by myself. Like, no, we need to be there for each other. And because a lot of abortion doctors and abortion providers are going to stay open, and it's going to mean us taking care of each other and providing, like, okay, so how can we get the people who need care? How can we get them the abortion pill, which is increasingly safe? How can we get them to the clinic if they need to get to the clinic? Like, I mean, how do you both feel about that?
I totally do not buy into this notion that if you vote for anybody in power, they will save you. So I'm all about people helping people, about mutual aid networks. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because there are some amazing groups right now doing work in these areas, like helping women get abortions for free, helping them fund abortions. Like we were talking about, getting out of state costs money and requires resources that many people might not have. So I'm all about mutual aid networks and not relying on electoral politics to save us, because they've shown that they don't, and they won't. That's my kind of my take on that part.
Me too. But those mutual aid networks are going to have to be, underground if we're helping women get abortions, if it's illegal. This is like you're doing mutual aid at your own peril. And that's, I, as someone's mom, I'm like, well, can I risk, there's this level of risk you have to be able to take on, like, and it's hard. It's hard to think about what's going to happen very soon in our country. It's hard. I have a little girl. If Republicans get in by the time she's of reproductive age, which comes a lot sooner than one might imagine, she might not have access to not only abortion, but, as they said, this is just the beginning of the rollback of rights. She might not have the ability to marry whom she chooses, be it a same-sex partner, or a same race or different race partner, she may not have like the freedom that is being removed from her. Somehow I feel like, well, I'm old, but when it comes to like the fact that I see what she's going to have to deal with, we're going back to like the don't get raped, I have to talk to her about all of that. And then she's the one who has to be really careful about sexuality because, it's all of this kind of tossing women back into a bygone era that gives us a responsibility that men should also share in.
Well, can I share a personal story since that's why I created this show?
Do it.
So my grandma was making fun of me about my male partner because he's very amorous. She was like hazing me. She was like, Jocelyn, be careful. He's trying to get you pregnant. I can feel it. And I was like, all right, calm down, grandma. And I just asked, I was like, all right, I'm 30. You can be real with me. Did women actually wait till marriage when you were an adult, a young adult? She was like, Jocelyn, of course. There was no birth control. There was no abortion. There was no option. So women, she's an Italian immigrant family. She said if women got pregnant, then they would disappear. It was horrible.
That's
and
right.
she was talking about like it was a shame upon the family. The
Mhm.
woman's life was essentially over, or she would like reappear and the baby had been swept off to the nuns. It was traumatic. And she said women lived in fear about sexuality. They lived in fear about any kind of autonomy. And so you just had to hope the dude you married at 21 was your soulmate, because otherwise, like, and it was shocking because it's so obvious, right? Feminist scholars write about this all the time, but it's another thing to hear this from your grandma. She was like, yeah, of course we waited. We didn't have an option. We didn't have the options you do. Where for me, my mom's an OB and she's pretty open about sex. And she's like, she's the opposite. She's like, stop dating every man you have sex with. Sometimes you just need to have sex. Like, and it's like, it's this whole new world for women because women can make the choice. Okay, is this who I want to marry? Is this who I want to trust? And it's created a whole new generation of women who have professional options, who have not even professional options, just options about their lives and their bodies and about when they become parents. That just 2 generations ago, my grandma's not that old. She's like 70 or something. Like didn't have those.
My father's talked to me about sex when I was, I don't know how old, 13 or 12 or something. He sat us down, and mind you, my father is from Southern Italy. He's passed away now. But it was that old school mentality. It's not just Catholic. It's like, I don't know, worse, like repressive patriarchy from the 16th century. And he said, listen, and I used to say this in my stand-up routine because it's so absurd. He'd say, if God forbid you should ever get pregnant, and he said it, of course, with a broken English accent that he had that I love. He said that, and I quote, "For the shame you bring upon my family, I will kill that boy." So he would murder he was like attempted murder. And then he said he would kill himself because of the shame.
Yes.
And I thought it was very loving that he wouldn't also kill me, because that is another threat that happens. But like that is such a deep, old way of thinking.
Yes.
I was like, okay, because I was already, I'm growing up in America. I'm like, I don't think your zeitgeist is fitting in our culture. And there was this huge split there, but that kind of thinking is not that far off especially for people who are, newly immigrated. It's not, it depends how long you've been in this country that thinking is kind of off the map a little bit.
And it's, it's something we take for granted, right? I don't want to minimize the patriarchy that still exists with women, or not even women, non-men or non-straight men in this country, that is still very oppressively shame-based. But we have come so far. And a lot of that is directly linked to reproductive justice. The minute non-men had say over, okay, I want to be sexual, but I don't want to be a parent yet, that created a whole new generation for people. Or Or, you know, the beginnings of the Me Too movement, long before, like, okay, you know, I was sexually assaulted. That's violence. That's not just the way things are. That's not just, oh, you know, no, that's violence. That's a violation of me. It's a violation of my autonomy. And that thinking is so new. We forget it wasn't that long ago that these conversations, which we take for granted, were just not had.
Yeah, that's
my grandfather did not threaten to commit suicide if I got pregnant, but he, like yours, Juliana, but he did tell me that, you know, essentially it's more of a risk for, you know, the pregnant person, or the, you know, who could potentially get pregnant. But I was thinking about what you were saying, Jocelyn, and how I was also thinking how they put so much responsibility, society, and like in the medical field, so much responsibility on the woman or the person who can get pregnant versus on the man. Like for men, birth control exists in the form of condoms or vasectomies, which I hope more men will get if they don't want to get anybody pregnant. But women have, you know, there's birth control, which affects us hormonally and oftentimes in ways that we
don't get me started.
I'm personally not on it because of the way that it affects my body.
No, me neither.
I tried the implant in the arm. It made me bleed basically forever, and I'm already anemic. There's the IUD, which, if you know what that is, sounds to me like a torture device.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
No,
but you know, and like, you know what, men have something that they could put on their penis.
Seriously.
You know, like, why is there not male birth control? And I think it's been tested, and maybe I should do more research, but I think they were like, oh, I have some side effects. Okay.
Literally. And you know what? This is why
outsourcing the side effects to the women.
I love everything you just said, Rebecca, because that is a thing that just shakes me to my core. How, again, so I have to do a heavy recommendation for, oh my gosh, I think it's called The Principles of Pleasure. It's on Netflix. I like to think I'm pretty informed about, you know, sexual and women stuff. It blew my mind. Some of the things it was basically psychologists and pleasure activists talking about how our society is currently set up where one of the things Dr. Nagoski says is that if people allow you have sexual pleasure in this culture based on your proximity to a white man. So if you're a white man, you can do whatever you want. If you're a white woman having sex with a white man, that's probably fine. But the further you get from that, the more our culture punishes you for engaging in any kind of sexual relationship or pleasure. And I never thought of that before. But when I think about the abortion issue, I think about we are punishing women for being sexual beings, because obviously I believe in cases of rape or anything of that nature, definitely it should be available. And almost everyone believes that. It's shocking that like that is also being legislated against. But then when you get into the fact that maybe a woman wants an abortion just because she doesn't want to get pregnant, that is where Republicans have really done a great job of seizing on our society's hatred of women. It's like, oh, well, she should have been more responsible. A lot of these women are mothers with kids already and married. It's just shocking to me.
Yeah, she should have been more responsible to get that implantation up the tube.
Yes.
What a terrible person. She's a welfare queen that she couldn't get that implantation in the tube. You know, it's just like brings it. Rebecca, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, like, Jocelyn, you said hate, like the word hate. And when I was thinking about this, like, stripping somebody's bodily autonomy, making somebody carry and deliver, it's not just inhumane. It is inhumane, but it is also, it feels hateful. Like you hate somebody that much, you're going to go through something like that they don't want to go through, you know?
It's definitely hateful. And also when I was pregnant, I realized that men, most of them, and I'm sure, Jocelyn, you're going to get shit for what I'm about to say in the comments, or maybe I'll just keep it to my own.
No, say it. Go wild, girl.
They don't know fuck all about what women are going through. They don't know the feelings that it is when you're pregnant. They don't know the feelings that, you know, they just don't. Okay. # not all men. I get it. Whatever. But like, Let's not go crazy. But there is a real divide between men's ability to understand what it is a woman's going through. So basically, if you're forcing a birth on a woman, you're probably forcing a incision between their vagina hole and their butthole. That's what a lot of women have to go through, and that is the fucking least of it. So can we talk about forcing a woman to have give birth in like the bloody nasty terms that it is to give birth? This is not a cleaned up experience. This is screaming, this is screeching, this is potential death, facing your own mortality. This is, this is the most out of control situation that people face, I think, in life. And we try to control it with doctors and blah, blah, blah. But it's
I don't mean to be alarmist or, and I really don't, but like, I've been, you read these articles and one of them I came across was saying like, they're afraid that women or pregnant people will commit suicide because they feel like they don't have a choice because of the very things that you're talking about, Juliana.
I know. I was like, how am I going to talk to my kid? Am I going to be like, wear contraception and that's still available because I'm sure they're going to try to outlaw that too. And, try not to. And then if you, and definitely don't. But then if you do, you can come to me. Like, how do you even message around? Don't jump off a building, no matter what happened. Like what?
Yeah.
For mothers of young girls, it's a bind. In addition to being a bind for the mother themselves.
Well, and like, I really, I hope that everyone feels emotionally safe right now because I really love where this conversation has gone because it's something I feel like the older I get, this is all I think about, that our culture expects women to endure just endless suffering, emotional and physical, under patriarchy, and to not talk about it. Mm-hmm. Sexual assault is incredibly high rate. Domestic violence, incredibly high rates. Mother and infant mortality, incredibly high rates. And, so I'm...
Poverty,
right.
Violence. It's violence. Like stripping the right to abortion away is violence. Poverty is violence. Everything that you just said,
And encourages financial reliance on a male partner. It's so funny. I am very like protective of my money. I'm like, no, this is my no male money. And like in my last relationship, my partner, who I obviously was a fan of, or I wouldn't have been with him, he'd be like, oh, like girl, you don't got to worry about money like that because you've got me. And I was like, good thing I didn't listen because and this is something that is so baked into our society of women are encouraged to give all their power and all their dignity away and take that trauma and that pain and just bury it. And it makes me furious and it makes me sick. I mean, I was, talking to my fiance when we first started dating and it became clear, we both want kids at one point. I was like, look, can I just tell you the truth? I don't know that I want to be pregnant. I know I want kids. And that felt like a shameful thing to say in a society which exalts motherhood and the sanctity of women carrying babies. I was like, it's kind of scary, man. Like, it's a lot. And we don't have a nation with a rigorous and safe healthcare system, an affordable healthcare system. And women aren't even allowed to say that. We're not even allowed to talk about the fact that, like, yeah, I don't know. It's a big thing. It will medically change you forever.
I mean, Juliana just talked about it.
But you know what I mean.
I'll talk about it. That's why you have me on here.
Yeah, that is exactly why I had you.
No, but in general, I think that's a good point. Like people don't talk about what it really is. And I have to tell you, Jocelyn, having, like had a kid and then having other people younger than me be like, Juliana, I have to confide in you. I'm not really liking being pregnant. It's like a secret shame. It's like, and then you get into this mom club where the moms are, like once you're pregnant or had been pregnant or, just like anything else, but you're like in this mom club and you you kind of understand. So where are the moms? We need the moms to come out and demonstrate and like link arms for the moms club. I think also we're kind of missing, we're not missing a point. There's a lot of good points to be made, but I'm just fascinated with the structure of what our society right now. Mm-hmm. And the overlap between the structure of society and the structure of the economy and the structure of our political, well, for lack of another better, different word, structure. So to me, when I look, like, this could all be fixed. I often say this could and would, along with most of our other problems, all be fixed by campaign finance reform. It's a basic issue that nobody's paying attention to, that the Supreme Court in its, economic fascism voted to give rights of free speech to corporations, non-living entities, making their donations unlimited, or the money. Their money is now considered speech according to the law, and so you can't limit it. And that is one of the nails in the coffin of the continuing march toward corporate fascism here in the United States. And this is, if we had campaign finance reform, you could vote. You know what I mean? Like, if no one was fined, this is why we trusted Bernie, right? First of all, he had this very long history of always voting the same way on every issue, whatever. So you could just look back and be like, well, he's certainly not flip-flopping. And then he was like, I'm only taking money from the people, not $27. If everyone was only taking money from the people, you'd really see what the people actually want and who the people want. And you'd be able to push them much easier than, okay, we're out in the street with our signs, but Raytheon's going to make a lot of money here, so I have to balance. If that was off the table, these and other problems would also be off the table.
No, I 500% agree, Juliana. And I love that you say that, because, look, if you're a history person, you know that patriarchy and fascism go hand in hand, because if you can remove more than half of the population, women and queer people, then it's easier to control what's left over. And it's also easier to control men if you're telling them, you have all the power. You're smarter and better. Don't you know how smart you are? Like, obviously not all men are going to fall for that, but a lot of them are. And that is why power structures do this, because they're just removing half of the people. Where it's like you're saying, Juliana, if the governments were more accountable to the entire population, a lot of these things wouldn't be happening. I feel so bad. We're almost at time.
Oh, no. I just want to say, that patriarchy and fascism go hand in hand. And to Juliana's point, capitalism and fascism go hand in hand.
Yes.
So I agree with you, Juliana.
Well, I agree with both of you. And it's, if there's any men watching, we agree. We appreciate you watching us, because most men will be like attractive, or at least just, I want to talk about attractive young women who are intelligent talking about fascism. What is this? We have frightened half the population in the United States.
I've stopped making fun of men on the internet as much, because the older I get, it's like you said, Rebecca and Juliana, it's fascism, capitalism. They use men as pawns, right? Like, and that's the thing. I'm not trying to minimize male bashing, which can be a fun hobby, but like, it's a lot of individual men wouldn't act this way in a different system,
That's true.
That's like what we're dealing with. Patriarchy is a tool at the hands with a lot of resources. So you guys are the guests, and I'm not treating you like guests, because you're also my friends and colleagues, and I love you so much. But we have like 5 minutes left. What do you want people to know about this fight? Because we spent a lot of time covering it for years.
Well, I just think we're coming to the awareness that this is, just one. It's a greater fight than just this issue. And I think the climate movement, the poor people's campaigns, the racial justice movements, the immigrant justice movements, all of the things that we're seeing are, it's all one big movement. And as we come together in solidarity, I think we're going to have real power. And I'm not sure how that's going to turn out, but I'm glad that this shock came out as a big, as a leak instead of a slow drip into tyranny. This is a fast jump, and we're not used to that here.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that had you not said it, Juliana. I think you're right. How about you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I agree with you, Juliana, about the shock, and how that could actually be a benefit to us. Yeah, being in Texas, I would say it's very scary to live in a state that threatens and restricts and criminalizes bodily autonomy, because to me, this is what this is all about, is having control over your own body, which is a fundamental human right. And so when people in power take those rights away, it strips you of your humanity. It's violent, it's dehumanizing and demoralizing. And so for me, the focus is on the bodily autonomy. And I just want to give a few shout outs to some groups right now that I feel are doing really amazing work. So I think everybody should check out aidaccess.org, which provides abortion pills basically to people in people where they're in states that restrict abortion. There's also Shout Your Abortion, which has a lot of helpful information, including information on digital security and how to keep your abortion private and secure. There's the Texas Equal Access Fund. They're hosting a workshop on May 20th about self-managed abortion and the law. There's also a group called If, When, How, which is the network of legal professionals. So they provide legal information. So I would just say, there's a lot of groups out there doing really amazing work, and to check them out and share information right now.
And I really love that you brought, I feel bad. I got carried away with talking to my favorite people here. But thank you, Rebecca, because I actually wanted to uplift some of those groups too and be like, so I have a friend that works at If, When, How, and I think she would be mad at me if I didn't again plug that abortion is still legal. Please do not let the of the news cycle keep you from accessing whatever care you need. And I think that's another, the next fight we have, right? Of people being really confused, okay, what can and can I not do, right? And that, as someone who already has, I don't want to say anxiety about the healthcare system, but I think just normal American anxiety of, you go up to the doctors, it's okay, how much is this going to cost me? Is this going to be covered?
And am I going to get my needs met, or is this asshole not going to listen to me? Back to what I first said at the beginning.
Yes, Juliana, exactly.
Sorry. Is this person just a pharmacist looking to, get his next trip to Hawaii based on how much Xanax he can prescribe? You know what I mean? There's, it ain't great out there. What can I say?
Well, and back to the mutual aid thing. I mean, I more and more think, we need to come together as community members to share resources and information and educate each other about best practices of how to protect ourselves in a healthcare system that is made to exploit and hurt us. Yeah, I'm sorry to end on a dour note. I feel like we're such cheerful people, but it's not a very
okay, I'll end on a funny note for you.
Please.
I thought it was kind of funny that the group called Shout Your Abortion is where you go to figure out how nobody finds out about your abortion. And with that, I'm just saying, it's a great group.
It was Juliana Furlano, everybody, and Rebecca Centeno, and do you want to come on again sometime?
Never, of course.
Sure.
Wonderful. I don't think it's a secret that the people who have watched my show know that Rebecca's been on before, and Jocelyn's a fairly regular addition to the chattering over at Act Now. So, but yes, thank you for the invitation.
Yes,
it's much more fun to have you host.
Wait, hold on. Before we actually close out, yeah, Juliana, when is Act Now? So
Act Now is Act Now. We focus on activism, what's happening in the activist community. We cover the things that Act TV is live in the field covering, and we try to bring the voices of activists out. And when they're not available, you'll just hear me, just like you just did. So We're on Thursdays at 1 p.m., but also available on Act TV's YouTube anytime, for example, in the middle of the night, if you're interested in that sort of thing. So find us on YouTube. We're also on Roku and Apple TV under the Act TV channels there. That's that. That's where you can find me.
And Rebecca, I know you are a very accomplished documentarian. Where can people find your documentaries?
Oh, thank you. I would say probably the best place is Vimeo. Yes, I would say my Vimeo page, and I'm also on YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah.
Until they decide to not let the left on YouTube anymore. We're still on YouTube for now.
Depends on if Elon Musk buys it or not. I guess we'll just have to wait. Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And I look forward to having you.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you for bringing these conversations to the fore and doing it in such a approachable, accessible way. I appreciate what you're doing here.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much, Jocelyn, for having us on.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.